Good morning. It's good to be with all of you. In this morning's scripture lesson, we're hearing the story that Paul tells addressing a group of Christians who were uncertain about their lives as they felt out of control. They were attracted to false teaching and practices in the pursuit of hope and security. Now, the early Christians were encouraged to choose to follow the teachings of Jesus, which meant turning their hearts and minds away from the empires and kingdoms of that world. And for us now, today, for us to turn away from materialism and prestige and power, and to live in the reign of love, which was at the heart of Jesus' message. I'll be reading from the book of Colossians, chapter 1, verses 11 and 12. May you be made strong with all the strength that comes from God's glorious power. And may you be prepared to endure everything with patience, while joyfully giving thanks to God, who has enabled you to share in the inheritance of the saints in the light. Thanks be to God for these words of encouragement. I knew a month ago that I was going to be speaking with you about generosity and gratitude. But what I didn't know is how my week preceding this message was going to unfold. I mentioned during my prayer request, my daughter Kristen had an accident on early Monday afternoon, and I get this call, and it's one of those calls that you just never expect. My daughter was driving on the way to her eye doctor appointment. She was driving down Route 130, and if you know Route 130, they have those pass-throughs. And somebody was coming across the highway, didn't see her, and she T-boned them. She was going 60 miles an hour. The other woman has a nice little dent in the side of her car, and she was able to get out of the car and walk around and complain about her neck and her back, but she was okay, and that's the extent of what we know about her. Kristen's car was totaled, and she shattered her wrist. And she had the sense of mind to get, she was conscious after it happened, and she went to the back of her car and got out an egg carton, which were there because she takes them back to the farm where she buys them from, and she splinted her own wrist before the EMTs got there. So I thought that was a pretty awesome thing. Now, mind you, her broken and shattered wrist is really bad, but she was going 60 miles an hour and hit another car, and she's alive. This is one grateful woman. Very grateful. One of the things that I thought was really fun is the traffic was really bad, when that happened. And they called, for some reason, they had 5 police cars there, an ambulance and the police and the fire truck. So when Matt got there, Matt is Kristen's husband, when he arrived, it was like a parting of the seas because the police made way for him to just get through so he could get to Kristen. And I thought that was it just is a lovely vision to see him getting to his wife, and he took her to the hospital. So I met them in the ER, and it was indeed a bad break, but after crashing into a car at 60 miles an hour, she is very lucky. She needed to have surgery on the wrist, but she had to stay home for a couple of days and rest while the swelling went down. And what she did is she reached out to a couple of her friends. Kristen is a knitter, and she spins yarn and wool and all that good stuff. So she's in a couple different groups, and she reached out to these ladies and said, I had this accident, I have to stay home. Can any of you come and spend some time with me and bring me food? And of course they did. So over the couple days she had several people staying with her, which I just thought was such a lovely, generous thing to do. But Friday, we get to Friday when she has to go for her surgery, and we get to the hospital at 12 o'clock for her 2 o'clock surgery. And then you know how it is at the hospital. You wait and you wait and you wait, and we waited some more. And then at 2 o'clock, Kristen went back, only to find out that the surgeon wasn't getting there till 3. And then at 4:15, they finally rolled her into the operating room. Well, Matt and I knew then that we had at least 2 hours of scheduled surgery. So we waited some more. Now it's 7:15, and we're panicking because now it's 3 hours into surgery, and 7:15 at night. Nobody's there anymore. You know, the nurse's station is closed up, they're all gone, there are only 2 lovely little old ladies waiting there. But at 8 o'clock, the doctor comes out and he hands Matt 2 copies of the x-rays of Kristen's wrist, which now has a huge piece of hardware in it. She has 5 pins in her thumb. He repaired her pointer finger and worked on carpal tunnel release on some of her other fingers. So she has major work. Now, you know, any of you who have had surgery before know that that's not the end of the story, because the recovery time is going to be a long time, and pain management is tricky as the healing begins. And it's really hard watching a loved one in pain. There's not much that you can do except ask your friends to pray for you, which is what I've been doing repeatedly all week long. But she's home, she's on the slow road to recovery, and she is covered with prayers across the country. We've asked so many people to pray for her. Moving on from that, 2 weeks ago, in one of his UCC devotionals, Vince Amlin shared research on human behavior in the face of disaster. The results from around the world and over a century was that, faced with a crisis, most people act in a generous, compassionate, and self-sacrificing way. They share resources, they work together, and they even risk their lives for strangers. Vince said that he was surprised because the stories he was used to hearing after disasters are about looting and violence, and every person looking out for only themselves. He went on to say that once in a while he'll catch a human interest piece about someone going out of their way, like my Kristen's friends helping her this week. Or the Halloween story of the little boy who took his basket of candy, and when he went to his neighbor's house, who was an elderly lady, and he saw that she was running out of candy, he dumped his entire bucket into her bowl of candy so other children wouldn't be disappointed. Those are those nice little stories that make us feel good. But Vince says he enjoys these stories as guilty pleasure, pieces of fluff, as he calls them, but he doesn't let it get him away, distract him from the real news. Disaster researchers have a name for the source of that real news. They call it elite panic. When the worst happens, the wealthy and powerful use the media to tell a story that allows them to maintain control and gain advantage. But why are so many of us willing to believe them? Why are we so quick to dismiss the stories of neighbors' kindness and care? Well, one reason offered by the Science of Generosity initiative is the fear of scarcity, a fear on the rise in America today. We're worried about our personal resources, our national resources, and our global resources. The fear of running out of money, of basic necessities, and basic comforts, which lead us to a mentality best described as, you need to get all you can and hang on to it. Well, certainly, there are people for whom scarcity of resources is a real problem, but for others of us, it would serve us to ask, do we have a scarcity problem, or do we have a distribution problem? The Science of Generosity initiative led a program for college students on Adulting 101. During the program, they encouraged students to create a personal budget for themselves. How much money do you take in income, and how much are your expenses? Then the all-important question, what's a want and what's a need? Do you really need all those Starbucks mocha frappes? Or do you really need books for your classes? Actually, a little bit of financial planning can go a long way when it comes to living a generous life. Now, I'll confess that money and economics is not my favorite topic. When my husband Joe and I meet with our financial advisor, I fight to keep my eyes from rolling back in my head from boredom. But it's important to make smart decisions and sometimes have difficult conversations about giving to church and charities while still maintaining your household budget and a retirement plan. Decisions made need to feel faithful to both of us. Do we have to cut back on some of our favorite indulgences? Yeah, sometimes. Perhaps buying fewer clothes or less Starbucks or less dinners out. But we benefit more from planned giving, and our causes will benefit more from our structured monthly contributions. The fear of scarcity is on the rise, but I imagine most of us could sit down, do a little financial planning, and discover we have more to contribute than we realize. Another reason Americans are less than generous, according to the Science of Generosity study, is a cultural value of autonomy, individualism, and exceptionalism. To put it more crudely, if it doesn't affect me or my family or my people, it's not my problem. Well, do you remember Greta Thunberg, the young environmental activist from Sweden? She has her work cut out for her when she encounters such ungenerous people as this guy Doug, who was part of their study. When asked about the problem of global warming and climate change, Doug responded by saying this: "I don't really pay attention to that stuff, but in the big picture of, is all the ice going to melt from Antarctica? Yeah, probably it will. Am I going to be here? Probably not. Are my children going to be here? Probably not." That's Doug. We are not Doug. Doug has horrible answers. And we're not those horrible people. So what can we, less awful, more generous people do to help a self-centered, self-serving society that's afraid of losing our resources and our freedoms and our privileges and our powers? Well, first, I think we need to be less shy about talking about money. Most people don't like to talk about it. Yet the Bible speaks often about money, and all religions encourage generosity. So it shouldn't be a topic that people of faith avoid. Do our children and our youth know the happiness, health, and purpose in life that we enjoy when we give generously? We do hope so. The article went on to say that we could all benefit from examining our lives and considering where we could be more generous. For instance, when we vote, do we vote just along party lines, or do we listen to each candidate's platform? Do we vote for candidates who promise to improve only our lives and our economic situation, or the candidates who will benefit the lives of the poor, the disenfranchised, and the stranger? Do we invest in relationships beyond our small circle of family and like-minded friends? Do we take any great risks of sacrifice or sacrifice resources we'll really miss to benefit those whose need is greater than ours? Generosity begets generosity. I pray we can all enjoy the health, happiness, and purpose in life our generosity inspires and encourage our society towards the same. Well, you know, we could actually choose to live the fear-based lives that the media has the ability to frenzy us into, or some of the politicians that lead us toward, or our own fears of never having, being good enough, or doing enough. Yet those choices drag us down to being terrified all the time and not living into the best person that we can be. Or we can choose to take the time and acknowledge all that we're grateful for. Now, sometimes on a really bad day, before we go to sleep at night, Joe and I will force each other to share at least 5 things that we're grateful for. And some nights it's really a strain to just pull 5 more things. And that's really silly if you think about it. We have so much in our lives to be grateful for. But it's important to look at our gratitude. There's also gratitude journals. People have been keeping gratitude journals for a long time, just writing down things every day of what they're grateful for, because it's great to go back and look at. Now, I heard an NPR story just yesterday about a neuroscientist and his study on gratitude. It began when his mother passed away and he was dealing with her grief, and he couldn't handle it. So he wanted to find out what was going on in the brain about grief, and more importantly about gratitude. So he started one of those gratitude journals, and he found that it changed him over time. It was a lot of work, and it took a lot of time. But he found that by acknowledging what he was grateful for, it truly changed who he was. It changed the way that he saw events and people. It's like looking for the good in people, not for the bad. It's like looking for the goodness while enduring difficult life situations, like many of us. are going through, but we need to look for the goodness that we do have in our lives. By living in the reign of love, and that's capital L, love. From the power of that love, the author of Colossians tells us that we draw strength to endure whatever comes our way and become people of joyful and grateful hearts. May it be so. Amen.